Okay, let's bring in Congressman Dan Crenshaw. You know he's a former Navy SEAL. He is also the author of a brand new book. It's called Fortitude, Resilience in the Era of Outrage, which is a great title for what we're going through right now. Tell us about your book, Dan.
Well, first of all, I'm just so happy to be here. So happy to be here on Valentine's Day. My wife is here as well.
All right,
and,
good job.
She was.
Do you want to bring her out on the couch?
I don't know if she wants to come out. I don't.
Maybe at the end of the segment.
Maybe
at the end.
But she was a big part of helping me write this. You know, you need that woman's touch on a lot of, especially a guy like me trying to write this thing. So this is fundamentally about mental resilience and toughness in this era of microaggressions and outrage and cancel culture. And you know, not too long ago, I was here in New York doing that Saturday Night Live skit.
Right.
And America sort of breathed a sigh of relief when we made amends on the show and made something positive out of it.
With Pete Davidson.
Right, with Pete Davidson.
Who mocked you.
Right. And but everybody was really surprised.
Right.
And that should trouble us. Why was everybody so surprised about that? And so we started writing this book, and I started thinking through this and taking lessons from the SEAL teams, taking lessons from psychology, from ancient philosophy, from our own history as Americans. And each chapter is a simple lesson in mental resilience, how to be tougher. And it's a bit about your own personal journey, but also about America's story and how we can really be a more resilient culture.
And people were probably surprised that, you know, it became a funny bit on Saturday Night Live and you know, you came together because America's so dug in. Seems like people are on the right are dug in, the people on the left are dug in, and you guys came together and did a funny show, and he said he was sorry.
Right, and I get into that in the book. You know, you have to have a sense of humor. And I talk about the really dark humor of the SEAL teams and what that can look like sometimes. And I talk about thinking through your reactions. You know, there's a lot of old idioms like, hey, count to 10 before you react.
Right. Before you hit tweet.
Right, and like, but let's dig into that. You know, let's dig into the 2,000-year-old Stoic philosophy that we've been looking at for a long time. Let's dig into some of the lessons I've got from the SEAL teams and how we remain still before we react. How we might look into a few layers of a policy before we instantly assume that the person proposing a policy is somehow bad intentioned.
Perfect segue. Here we are going through impeachment for a phone call. It goes on for 4.5 months. It puts everything grind to a halt. Then the budget comes out. That is the most outrageous thing Senator Schumer ever heard or read in his life. Nancy Pelosi went crazy. And then all of a sudden, the president tweets about a sentence recommendation about his buddy Roger Stone. Again, people are crying to impeach everybody over the top. In fact, here's an example of some of the outrage.
This is an abuse of power that the president is again trying to manipulate federal law enforcement to serve his political interest. And the president is what he is. He thinks he's above the law. This all must be investigated.
Something egregious like this demands that the Inspector General investigate.
If that guy won't resign, then the House should start impeachment.
Attorney General William Barr ought to be ashamed and embarrassed and resign.
So you think he's going to resign being ashamed and embarrassed?
William Barr? No, I do not. You know, I think William Barr has been doing such an incredible job, and he's frustrated.
Unflappable.
Yeah, I think he's frustrated by this. But these narratives will continue. We shouldn't be surprised by what we just saw. These narratives will continue over and over again. They've got their words that they like, and they sound something like abuse of power, and they're going to say that over and over again because it's vague. Right. Because you can make anything an abuse of power. Again, this is why their impeachment scam was so shallow and so thinly based. Right. So they're going to continue to do this, and the rest of us are going to remain calm and read Fortitude.
Very nice. All right. Meanwhile, this past week, we were up in New Hampshire taking a look at the New Hampshire primary. Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg did very well, and then Amy Klobuchar as well. Bernie Sanders, now, apparently right now, the face of the Democratic Party, which is freaking out some of the people, not only in Joe Biden's corner, but elsewhere.
I've noticed.
Now, you and Bernie Sanders kind of got into a little back and forth, didn't you?
Yeah. Did he respond back to me? I actually didn't notice if he did.
Yeah.
But
well, can we tell the audience what he tweeted out first? He said, I make no apologies for proposing the boldest and most aggressive climate proposal with our Green New Deal. this is a climate emergency. And then you tweeted back, then why didn't you vote yes for the Green New Deal when it came to the Senate floor? Maybe because it's not a plan or a good deal or even green. It's a third-grade science project.
Which is generous. I was being a bit generous with that, actually. First grade.
You really think first grade that isn't based in science or engineering care about reducing emissions? Question mark.
Hashtag new front end.
Hashtag
So
new
you know what? So
yeah,
you're not afraid to go on Saturday Night Live and make up, but you're also bold.
Right. Well, and the difference is, like, I'm not insulting the guy. You know, we're not calling him names. Okay. We're not doing what they do to President Trump. And more importantly, from a policy perspective, the Green New Deal is not an actual proposal. There's no actual plan in the Green New Deal. It just says everything's going to be wind and solar, and we're going to get rid of airplanes and cows. That's not a plan, all right? That's not a serious proposal. That's why it's more of a third-grade science project.
It really is.
And the irony of it, if you care about reducing emissions, you can't do what they're saying. What do they say all the time? They say ban fracking, ban fracking. We just reduced emissions in this country this past year by almost 3%, more than any other country in absolute terms. We've reduced more in the last couple of decades than the last 12 countries combined. That's a really big deal. But why is that? Natural gas fracking. That's why, because natural gas is a cleaner energy.
Burns clean.
And we should export it to the rest of the world.
And you also say, too, younger people, Republicans and Democrats, climate change matters, and there's something there. And there's a responsibility. There's a place between the new Green Deal and no deal.
Exactly.
Where are you?
New energy frontier. So Lee and Leader McCarthy, Garrett Graves, Greg Walden, we've all sort of put together all of these different plans. My part of that is the new energy frontier. It's about carbon capture. It's about investing in what is actually not science fiction, but really interesting stuff. Where you have plants in Houston. They're taking in natural gas, creating electricity for 5,000 homes, recirculating the CO2 through that process, zero emissions. So this is not science fiction. We want to invest more into that kind of technology. Create carbon innovation hubs that figure out what to do with carbon dioxide, make it a commodity. It's not a waste product. Let's create a market for it.
Just real quick, the last thing I want to get you on, because it matters to you as much as anybody, is yesterday the 7 or 9 Republican senators voted along with Democrats to limit the president's ability to declare war or take out a Soleimani in the future. He'll override this War Powers Act resolution, and he'll veto it, and it won't be overridden. But your reaction to the fact that it's brought up?
It really muddies the waters, and it's really great for Iran, right? Not the Iranian people, but the Iranian regime. I'm not sure I understand the premise here. It's based on this falsehood of two things. One, that the president acted illegally in the first place by attacking Soleimani.
He didn't.
He did not. Absolutely not. And the second false premise is that he plans to continue attacks on Iran, which is just not based in reality either. We acted in self-defense. There's no reason to overreact. And again, not act with fortitude. I'm always going to keep bringing this back to my book, since that's the subject of our interview today. But so then the question becomes, why do this? Why do this at all? If it states in there, this isn't any different from the War Powers Act, well, then why are we passing it?
Sure.
What is the point here?
Then.
Just for propaganda purposes, to signal to the Iranian regime that you support and not doing anything against them? I truly don't understand.
I don't understand
policy.
Mike Lee and Rand Paul among those, and Senator.
I think they felt insulted by the process earlier, and this is their way of showing it.
Dan, I know the audience loves you and supports you and appreciates your service, not only in Congress, but fighting for our country. And we wanted to ask any of you, do you have any questions?
Ron does.
Ron has a question.
Ron, where are you? Right over there. Good morning to you.
Hi, Ron.
Congressman, I'm in favor of term limits. I think more and more people want to see term limits, and there's a lot of lifelong congressmen and senators there. What can we do to change that?
Well, you would need a constitutional amendment, and I do support that. I also look at this with a great degree of nuance. You know, it's a lot of people say they want term limits, but you ask them, I could ask my own constituents, you want me to be term limited in 4 years? Because that's kind of extreme. They're like, no, I want everybody else to be term limited.
Right.
So you always have to take a step back and really wonder what you're asking for. A lot of people want those, but once you start showing people some of the downsides, there is a nuanced conversation here. It also gives a lot more power to the executive branch, right? If you always have junior Congress people in Congress, well, then who's in charge? Staff and the executive branch, the bureaucracy. So you
Because
got to
they're
be
always going to be there.
Got to be. It's not obvious that this will make things better.
So everyone terminated except Dan. Let's just do that. All right. Edward, you're out there. Edward, do you have a question? You have a question for Dan?
Yes, I do. Congressman, thank you for your service, first of all. What is the obsession the left has with illegal immigrants and protecting the rights of illegal immigrants? And no one talks about citizens and what we deserve and our safety.
That's exactly right.
From a border state.
Yes, and there was a new proposal recently. I think it's called the New Path Forward. Am I getting that right? New Path Forward has 44 co-sponsors, Democrat co-sponsors, which is one of the more unbelievable. Not only amnesty, but refusal to enforce the law at all with respect to criminal illegal aliens, not just illegal aliens, but ones who have committed other crimes while here in the United States. It's this is 44 co-sponsors. This, if one crazy person had proposed this, I don't think we'd have a right to bash it too much. But 44 co-sponsors is significant. That's a movement within the party. We should be focusing on American citizens. We should be able to make the case that we have a right as a country to protect our own sovereignty and protect our own borders. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing to be ashamed of there. We are pro-legal immigration. We are anti-illegal immigration.
Indeed. All right. We have time for one more question. Over on that side, Kevin, good morning to you.
Good morning, Kevin Suits from Houston, Texas, and border security is important to me. I've even written the White House and asking the president, is there something that we could do as far as start a fund, not maybe like a GoFundMe or whatever, because the American people are interested in this problem, and we want to do something to help get that border wall provided quicker. It's not just illegal immigrants, but it's also for national security reasons as well. Is there something we as people can do to help get that going in a faster direction?
Yeah, isn't that fund called our taxes?
There is, as it turns out. That's a good point. Plus, they actually did do this. There is a section of border wall built in El Paso that was privately built with that reason. Now, but the reality is that the president is still diverting funds from certain military construction projects to build the border wall. It's also about enforcement. So, I mean, what can you do as a citizen? Honestly, get out and knock on doors and explain to people that we are pro-legal immigration, but we're against illegal immigration. And you can't just have people walking across the border. We have to enforce the laws. The border wall fixes part of the problem. A huge part of the problem, though, is the catch and release nonsense that has been happening for years. Now, our current Homeland Security Department has gotten their arms around this problem in a very big way, and we should be very proud of that. That doesn't get really much attention, but it should. They're doing a much better job of actually, hey, once you've crossed illegally, getting you back and deported, as opposed to just released into our population.
I think there's a lot of good news here, especially in building of the wall, because they're repurposing another $4 billion. The president only needed $2 billion. He said basically you have enough money, and he's gotten the deals with private landowners. A lot of them are giving in, saying, okay, I need the wall too. So he's got 100 miles built. He's got a real shot by January 1st of 2021 of getting 400 miles built, and he's putting technology on top, cameras and lights. So I think there's a real good story to tell.
There is. It's going in a good direction.
All right.
Thank you, Congressman.
So the book comes out on April 7th. It's called Fortitude. Dan Crenshaw.
Thank you all. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Great to see you.